I'm going to show you a method for a tubular cast on, and you can use this for the edge of a sweater or a hat or mittens, whatever kind of cast on that calls for a 1x1 ribbing to follow, or you can do a 2x2 ribbing to follow, knit 1 purl 1 or knit 2 purl 2. And you will begin with your project size needle, so whatever your pattern is calling for, and your yarn. And what I do is I have a tail. This one's going to be short, but just have your tail and you set up your fingers and your yarn as though you were going to do a long tail cast on. So you wrap your pinky around both ends of your yarn and you insert your pointer and your thumb into the loop that's formed. Tighten that up a little bit, and then you have this strand that's running between your pointer and your thumb. What you're going to do is take the point of your needle, lay it on top of that strand, and then point it down and spin it around. So then you've got the yarn wrapped around your needle with a little twist at the base. And that's going to count as your first stitch. So what you're going to do then is bring your needle point around the top strand, up in between the two, over the one that's on your thumb, and then scoop it all the way underneath. You don't come up in between again. And that's your second stitch. Then you're going to take your tip and go the opposite direction. This time you're going to go underneath the first strand, come up in between, scoop the second strand, and then come all the way under, not up the middle. And then you have a third. And then you just repeat that back and forth, around the top, up the middle, scoop the bottom, all the way under, around the bottom, up the middle, scoop the back, all the way under, around the top, up the middle, scoop the bottom, all the way under, around the bottom, up the middle, scoop the top, all the way under, top, middle, scoop, under, bottom, middle, scoop, under, top, middle, scoop, under. Alright, so I'm going to just pause for a minute here, and I want to show you close up the stitches on the needle here. So you can see this one, the second one here, looks like it has a purl bump around it, and that in fact is going to become a purl stitch. And then the next one, the ones next to it, are more smooth, more like a knit stitch looks. And then a purl bump on the next one, and so on across. So let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I'm going to do a little bit more since I still have some tail there. So if I look at this close up, I can see that the most recent stitch has a purl bump at the bottom. So I'm going to, and it's, let's see, the purl bump is coming from the yarn that's over my pointer finger. So I'm going to then know that the next stitch that wraps around my needle has to be this yarn that's over my pointer finger. So under, middle, scoop, under, middle, scoop, under, middle, scoop, under, middle, scoop. And I'm going to end with a purl so I have an even number of stitches on my needle. Now I'm going to, this is just twisted here at the end, so you kind of need to hold on to it with your fingers somehow. Keep that twisted. Turn it around. And then you're going to work these stitches with your other needle. Now, if you look at the first stitch, we remember that that was a purl when we cast on. So we're going to knit that one on the wrong side. We can see that it looks like a knit stitch right there. So what you do is you just knit it, and it's oriented twisted, just due to the way that we cast on. So what you do is you knit this one through the back loop. Just knit it off, and once you've knit it, then you don't need to worry about the twist of that very last cast on stitch. Then you bring your yarn to the front and just slip this next stitch as if to purl with the yarn in front. Then move the yarn to the back. We're going to knit the third stitch through the back loop, like so. Move the yarn to the front, slip this next fourth stitch as if to purl. Bring the yarn back, knit the fifth stitch, the odd stitch. Bring the yarn to the front for the next even stitch, purl that, or slip it purlwise. Bring the yarn to the back, knit through the back loop. Bring the yarn forward, slip as if to purl, yarn back, knit through the back loop, yarn forward, slip purlwise, knit through the back loop, yarn forward, slip purlwise, knit through the back loop, yarn forward, slip purlwise. Then you're going to turn your work around, and we're going to work one more row. These are setup rows before we will be appreciating this sort of tubular edge here. I'll show that to you when we get to it. So the stitches are now oriented correctly, so we don't need to knit through the back loop anymore. So we're going to knit the first stitch, slip this next one purlwise with the yarn in front, knit the odd stitch, yarn forward, slip as if to purl the even stitch, and so on to the end. You can see this one looks like a knit stitch. It's smooth down here. So we're going to knit that one. You can see this next one has a purl bump on it, so we're going to slip that one as if to purl. Just continue to the end of the second setup row. Alright, so now we've got this setup row, and you can really see how this bottom edge is tubular. It kind of just rolls right around the bottom there. It's almost as if you hemmed it. Alright, so after those first two setup rows, you can now work your stitches as usual. You'll knit the knits and purl the purls. And if you wanted to, if you're knitting flat back and forth on your needles, then you just go. You just continue at this point. If you're knitting in the round, you could transfer this onto your circular needles or to your double pointed needles and join in the round, and then you can go. On this third round is when, if you want to do a 2x2 rib, you would sort of realign these stitches. You change the order of them. So if you're doing a 1x1 rib, you just go on from the setup rows as you would like, whether you're doing flat or in the round. If you want to change this into 2x2 rib, you start off just the same way. Setup rows 1 and 2 are exactly the same. But in order to change this to 2x2 ribbing on the third row, this is what we do. You can do this on the flat knitting third row or in the first round of knitting, of joining it into the round on double points or on circulars. What you do is you knit the first stitch. There's knit 1. Now you can see that the second stitch is purl, but if we want to have knit 2, purl 2, we need to switch the placement of this purl stitch with the next knit stitch. So what I'm going to do is put my needle into the next knit stitch as if to knit it. So I'm just securing a spot there. Then I'm going to slide these 2 off and put the purl stitch back on that left needle, and then put this knit stitch back on the left needle and knit it. Then, because we traded places of the third and the second stitch, there will be 2 purls next to each other, so those will just purl, because that's what our pattern is, knit 2, purl 2. Then we need to knit 2. So the next stitch is a knit, so we just knit that as usual. But here we went into a purl stitch first and then a knit. So what I do is I slide my needle into the knit stitch, which is 2 down, slide these off, and just put the left hand needle into the purl stitch. The knit one is still over here on my right hand needle. Bring that around, put it back on my left needle. There's a knit now. Knit that one. Purl the next 2. Now we need knit 2. So here's 1 knit stitch ready for us. But again, we need to switch the place of this stitch and this stitch. So slide this one in to the second stitch as if you're going to knit it. Take both stitches off of the left hand needle, put the left hand needle back into the purl stitch, then put it into this knit stitch and knit that one. So now we have 2 knits here, and we have 2 purls coming up. Purl, purl. Now, at the end here, we have 1 knit stitch, and this one, which is technically a purl, but if you just go ahead and knit it, that's fine, and then you have knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2 across. And it will work the same as if you were doing it in the round. You just do the same adjusting of the stitches. And you can see, if you look closely, where the second knit stitch of this first row is sort of tipping over there because we've crossed it. It used to be in the 3rd stitch position, but because we've rearranged those 2, that one sort of tips to the right a little bit, and each one does that. Once you work your whole piece, it won't be as noticeable, and it's just sort of blends right in. So this is the tubular cast on. Makes a very nice edge to a garment.